Discover the heartbeat of Lexington at the Marriott City Center, your premier downtown destination. Let us handle all your meeting needs, whether you're planning a corporate gathering or a special celebration. Our elegant, versatile spaces provide the perfect setting for every moment. Don't forget about our great room bar, a perfect spot to stop in after work or before a game to enjoy handcrafted signature cocktails. You don't need to be a hotel guest. Just relax and unwind, whether you're gearing up for the game or winding down afterward. Lexington Marriott City Center, your ultimate destination to stay, connect, and celebrate. We've got everything you need to make every moment unforgettable.
Kentucky football is airborne this week. I expect that there's going to be some turbulence up ahead. For the first time this season, the Wildcats leave Kroger Field and fly straight into the storm in an SEC clash in the heart of Columbia, South Carolina, against the South Carolina Gamecocks. Morgan, this is not just another game. This is a turning point in the season. I'm excited. I'm a little uneasy. I don't know what to expect. But buckle up. I'm back in the booth with my guy, former QB1, Morgan Newton. How are things in Fayette County this evening?
They're good. Gearing up to watch a little bit of the Lions and Ravens. It's an exciting one. Lamar versus the NFC on Monday night, which is always good. We got a big win over Catholic in the Holy War in Kentucky. That was huge. So feeling pretty good right now about that. Had a good weekend with the family. Been a couple soccer games. I was up in your neck of the wood at a couple soccer games in Louisville this week. So great weekend. How you making it?
Man, things pretty good here in Jefferson County. It's a little stormy, but we're doing well. You mentioned the Holy War this past Friday night, LCA versus Lex Catholic. I saw the clip there at the end, Nash making a big-time play there in the back of the end zone. Who did he hit in the back of the end zone to pull you guys ahead?
Yeah, that was TK, Tyler King. He's a stud, good player. Nash has been awesome, so it's been a good year so far.
Talk me through that last drive. You know, what's going through your mind there as the quarterback coach? Did you know what the play was going in? Were you involved at all in making the play call?
So we've got a different team this year, Jeremy. We got a team that doesn't score a ton of points, but is a really strong team, kind of led by our defense in a lot of ways. And like the nickname says, it had been a war that entire game. Lexington Christian, Lexington Catholic, they're really not very far away from each other geographically. But it's become a pretty good rivalry in football that has a lot of energy, a lot of emotions. And so we got there towards the end of the game. We were down in the first half, kind of made a comeback in the second half, and it was 21-21. I had about a minute or so left. So, had a really good positive drive starter, worked in a deeper play down the field, which was good. And then, towards the end, we were able to hit our guy TK in the back end zone. So it was a great game. It was an exciting win. Hit that play in the end zone with 15 or so seconds left, and the Christians prevailed.
No, that's great, man. That place erupted. I saw the royal family there at the game. I saw the Boley family. I saw Cutter there where he was down on the sideline as well, checking it out. What was that like having him in the house? Just talk about what that win means at this stage of the season.
It was great. And the who's who is probably about right. I'd say that, when you get Lexington Christian and Lexington Catholic together, you've got people that live amongst each other, people, co-workers on both sides of it. The Boleys were there. They were with us at LCA for a couple of years. They understand that it's a big game on the schedule for Lexington Catholic and Lexington Christian. So, yeah, Cutter was in attendance on a bye week, which was cool, and his family, and it was great to see him. And we had several other former players there, too, that are invested in that game.
Lexington Christian trailed 13-0 in that game. You guys able to claw back into that game, force a punt with just under a minute and a half left. Game was tied 21-21, and Nash Whalen, how about the 76-yard drive and 7 plays leading the offense down the field. I saw where he was able to connect with Jeremiah Burbage. That's a name that sounds a little familiar to me.
Yeah.
Should that sound familiar to me?
Yeah, it's the son of Cornell Burbage, another former UK great. Cornell's an unbelievable personality, helps on the staff, spent some time in the NFL, a Lexington native. Big catch. Jeremiah is one of our pups, as we say, our baby eagles. That's just growing up in the program now. He's got a bright future. He continues to make big plays in these games, even as a young player. So it's a really good game, I think, for both schools. It's great that they play each other. I think we've played each other the last 9 or 10 years, if I'm not mistaken. Jeremy, it's a lot of energy in that game. Really fun environment.
Morgan, looks like there's not going to be a split in the fan base. Mark Stoops this week got out early in front and announced Cutter Boley would be QB1 going into Columbia. What are your thoughts on Cutter being named going into Columbia for his first road start?
I'm appreciative of Coach Stoops and making that decision and getting it done early. I think it's great timing when you're coming off of a bye week. Give Cutter more reps in practice, specifically with the ones. We got a lot of time to prepare and get him ready for the first true road game of the season. It's a great time, and I'm glad he did it. Thankful for Coach. I think it gives us a great opportunity to be successful at South Carolina, who has had maybe a tough start to the year based on what their expectations were coming in. I think South Carolina's looking at their schedule, and they probably see this as a must-win. And so we need to be prepared to go down there and do a good job.
If you don't have a lot of players in your state, you generally don't have a good program. If I said to you, top 5 programs, all things considered, where are you?
You're going to think I'm joking with you, but Kentucky football would be the job that I would want to take. Mark Stoops makes close to $10 million a year. The goal there is to win 7 games. Rural Kentucky, you can be there forever. He's got a massive buyout. That guy figured it out. Now, if you do want to compete for a national championship, the answer is the University of.
What are your thoughts on Josh Pate's response to the question posed by Colin Cowherd?
My initial response was, great. I don't know. I was uncertain. I got to thinking about it. He's probably not wrong at times, certain years. There's probably some merit to what he's saying. I do think Kentucky's a great job now. But Jeremy, you and I both, I'm not saying it was a bad job, but it was a different job 15 years. Now, I get a little bit tired of we took over this bad team and all that stuff, just because I think at the end of the day, there's such a fine line between being a good team and a bad team in this league. Win here, win there, a player there from recruiting a player, that sort of thing. And it was still a team that had been to some bowl games in recent history. But I think that the job is different now than it was then, and it's for a few different reasons, and we've talked about this before. The investment in the program has significantly changed in assistant coaches, head coaches, and now through the NIL era. In facilities, the facilities have changed at Kentucky quite a bit. I think the expectation has changed some, and I think that was his point, as maybe the expectation doesn't rival that of some of the other teams in the league. I think that was his primary point. And that aligned with the salaries, the head coaching salary. But I would say when Stoops took the job, those salaries were not that. And the expectations were not where they are today. And you still had to do it with, at that time, Calipari on the other side of campus. That's always been something that Kentucky battled from a football perspective. Is there enough oxygen in the room between the football and the basketball program, especially as basketball starts to heat up come about October, November time of year? What was your thoughts on how his message and what he said?
Josh Pate is a well-respected media personality in this space, and he's a guy that articulates his points, I think, very well. And it's hard to disagree with him that it's not a premium job. I just think he stopped short, Morgan, of explaining even more. I think it's a very short-sighted opinion. I think that there's so many other facets to the University of Kentucky and what the university and the community have to offer that really bolsters and makes this a great job. It's not just the money. It's the people. It's the experience. It's the horse racing. There's so many things that encompass the Kentucky spirit, and to just kind of leave it out there and say that it's just about the money, I think the argument's a little cheap, but at face value, it's a fair assessment. Mark Stoops did bring 2 10-win seasons.
Mhm.
So with the success that he had in the program, setting a new precedent in terms of consecutive bowl games in a row, of being the winningest coach in this program, Mark was rewarded with the unprecedented success that he had in this role. And unfortunately, some of that momentum has slowed down. And I'm hopeful that this week in South Carolina, that Mark's able to take the football team and that they're able to deliver a loss to South Carolina, because just like us, they need a win in the worst way.
Mm-hmm. I think it's a great point. I would say this, and you hit on it. You and I have both decided to make Kentucky our home. To the point that you've made, there's great people here. It's a great place to live, great place to raise families. And that message certainly wasn't depicted in his quick soundbite. Now, and I don't even necessarily feel like, although it probably could come off as a shot, I don't necessarily feel like it was a shot at Kentucky. I think he was using it to describe some of the jobs are available in college football today. There's a broader conversation happening about the changes in some of those jobs and how they rank amongst jobs in college football today. Because there's no doubt in my mind in the NIL era, there's probably more parity in college football today, more change and shifts from year to year. He maybe didn't describe that in his message, but I think it's clear that's a part of the current landscape. Mr. Barnhart, for the most part, has delivered on needs to upgrade facilities, upgrade the salary pools for key programs like football, and has tried to adjust with the times in an NIL and a profit sharing space. I do think, though, facilities don't quite woo the recruits and the players as much today as maybe they did 15, 20 years ago when you and I were coming up. Yeah, I think NIL's impacted that some. I think there's more of an emphasis on the compensation potential in NIL potential.
I could be short-sighted, but over the last 10, 15 years, I think that there's only been one coach that has left the University of Kentucky, potentially over salary issues and or facilities. And I think that was Edric Floreal, the track coach who was responsible for bringing Sidney McLaughlin and a whole slew of Olympians into the University of Kentucky, some of which our fan base and our university are still benefiting from tremendously. I'm not going to sit here and claim that I know all the ins and outs. I do know that there were some things that Coach Floreal potentially asked for. Now, whether they were deal breakers or not, or whether Austin, Texas was just a more preferred climate, I don't know.
In today's market, you've kind of got to choose which programs you're going to focus on investing in. And I think Mr. Barnhart does a great job of spreading out the resources, investing in programs across the board. I think he's proven to have a great track record. And I think the athletic department takes great pride in department-wide success, maybe even more so than I would if I were in that seat. And I just think they deserve great credit for that.
I think we're at this point in our friendship where I feel safe letting my hair down. I was a kid growing up where Fridays I'd rush home, a little bit of ABC, TGIF, a little Nick at Night, and then I transitioned into the more spooky things. That's where the X-Files and Unsolved Mysteries, that's where those shows tended to kind of creep into my nighttime behaviors. I gotta ask, have you seen any of the recent UFO disclosures that have been presented to Congress, as well as by naval officers, et cetera, particularly the ones with claims that UFOs are not just limited to the sky, but there's potentially 5 to 6 sites underwater that UFOs and other entities could be originating from and returning to?
Well, I never thought about it. And it's not necessarily something I've spent a lot of time thinking about. I do have a son, my oldest son, Peyton, is very science driven. So I'll have him do some research and provide us a report. But I'll say this. Why wouldn't there be signs in the water? I mean, isn't Earth made of more water than land? So
Yeah.
if there's signs on land, then I have to guess there's probably signs in water too.
I'm looking forward to seeing the book report that your son presents. Make sure you tell him APA, double space, then make sure that works cited page is completed.
He knows nothing about OpenAI, Gen AI. So just know it'll be a book report that he did himself.
SEC football, NFL football is the greatest product that comes on TV over the course of the weekend. But there's something I got to talk about. This culture shift, and maybe it's always been there. I mean, I'm just a little bit more sensitive to it now as a healthcare professional. But I feel like the NFL is heading into a situation where they're allowing the media to eat the young players. And it's getting to a point where, for me, it's so distracting. And I think that some of the takes from the media as a whole at all levels, that they are so critical of not only the professional athletes, but also the collegiate athletes. And specifically, Caleb Williams with the Bears, Ashton Genty with the Raiders, Travis Hunter with the Jacksonville Jaguars. I've seen so much negative publicity around these young players where they're expected to come into the league for some reason and make impacts within the first 2 weeks of the season. What's going on in the NFL? Does the NFL have a media problem where they need to rein some of this in order to potentially protect the mental health and growth and development of its young players?
And it's a great question. I think the answer is, my response would be, a problem for who and for whom? You know, the media, it's all about promoting the product to their customers and to their fan bases. Several of those new players come in with followings of their own, and those storylines drive the NFL. Much like Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce might drive some of the storylines with the Chiefs.
There have to be better storylines than, why isn't Genty going off for 200 yards? Why isn't Travis Hunter the best number one wide receiver and the best number one cornerback simultaneously in the league? Why isn't Caleb Williams the savior? Because it was all Justin Fields' fault, right?
I just think that the new players, the fresh blood, and they bring them in and they have their followings that they bring from college, especially ones that were Heisman candidates or Heisman winners in a couple of the cases of the examples that you just mentioned. And we just live in a society where the news is cycled through really quickly, and there was some fresh blood. Unfortunately, protecting the mental health of some of these new players, it's hard to align that to ROI for the NFL. I think they're challenged when you can just bring in a new crop of rookies the next year. I think there's just not much incentive for them to do so and prioritize it in that regard. But for a player in general, today more than ever, you have an opportunity to grow your brand through the media, whether it be, the conventional ways of media or social media or other avenues. So I would say they probably welcome many of those media interactions, and it impacts their branding, at least financially, in a good way.
I remember what it was like as a young player there in Washington when I started to hear sound bites with my name being used in regards to particular plays. And that star former player turned media person was LeVar Arrington. And it got back to me, a guy like LeVar Arrington, who I thought the world of, and I still do. But at that time, he was a media personality in Washington. His job that he was tasked with was to provide, high quality information to the Washington, D.C. football junkies. And I came up on the short end of that at times as a young player. And I remember, hey, I'm going to text this guy. and see what his deal is. And, LeVar and I, we had a couple exchanges, and, pretty quickly, I think I learned that, man, this is a different deal from a media perspective. It really is. And for me, I wasn't thin-skinned, but I do worry about some of these players and whether they're built to handle this type of criticism. What are the support structures that are in place? Obviously Ben Johnson giving Caleb Williams the game ball after a tremendous performance this past Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that there was a missed opportunity there as the head coach to dead some of these rumors, as the kids say, to say that this is our QB1. I've heard all the news stories all week long. This is our guy. This is my guy. We're moving forward. And in that moment, just getting the game ball felt cheap to me. I think in that moment, he really had an opportunity to be uplifting and give Caleb Williams a little bit more. And what was really impactful for me in that situation is that Caleb Williams was the bigger person. You know what he did? He took his game ball and gave it to his head coach for his first win.
Those are always great moments, as you know. And I think Caleb has gained some criticism from the media or for whatever else because he handles leadership and portrays himself as a leader and maybe in an atypical way. Maybe he's not what some might say is the quintessential alpha that we've grown accustomed to seeing lead football teams, specifically in big markets like a Chicago Bears. And you're right. I mean, Ben Johnson has the opportunity to elevate Caleb into a stature that really does him a favor amongst his teammates and amongst media members. But I also think we're remiss to Ben may not see it. I mean, Ben's trying to figure this job out, just like Caleb's trying to figure his job out, and like many people are trying to figure their job out. So maybe he hasn't looked into it quite as deep as you and I have. It probably was a missed opportunity. And I think, like most people do, if he can rethink how he, in Caleb's next big game where he throws for nearly 300 yards and 4 touchdowns, I'm sure Ben might have something different to say. They'll get another shot at it.
I often miss the elephant sitting in the room, but even live, first time watching that press conference, hearing all the chatter coming out of the Midway, coming out of Chicago this past week, I don't know how you miss that opportunity. And honestly, maybe the opportunity did happen and we weren't privy to what that discussion consisted of, because we know there's cameras that come in and they want that quick bite to disseminate to national and local media. So maybe they did have that exchange and we just didn't see it.
I'd say it's possible. You and I know that the historically great maximize those moments to share a message with their team, to share a message with their fan base, to share a message with their leadership ownership. And maybe Ben's not quite as nuanced just yet. Parcells wouldn't miss that moment. Schottenheimer, Prudy, some of the historically greats. And Ben will have that opportunity again. I feel confident.
How about your Colts? What's going right there? Talk to me about Dan Jones.
Sometimes it's just a fit. Was Daniel Jones in the right fit when he was in New York in the Meadowlands? Maybe not. Did the Colts have the right fit at quarterback in the carousel that they've had under center post Andrew Luck? They drafted Anthony Richardson and they decided that he's not quite ready for what they're trying to do. So I just think you might have found a good fit. Now, it's 3 games, so it's really exciting to see the Colts have a good start.
It is exciting, and I'm a big Dan Jones fan, and I remember when Kentucky was getting ready to play, I believe it was NC State in the bowl game, and I was watching some film cut-ups, and Duke popped up. I was on the phone with one of my buddies at the time who was a scout, and I see a couple plays. I'm like, hey, do you know who this guy is at Duke? Yeah. So I get on their website. I think he was a redshirt freshman at the time, and I'm watching him throw darts as he's getting hit. Couple of these clips where, he's getting smacked in the face by that Clemson defensive line. Just getting mushed. Pow. But balls coming out, boom. I remember just being excited about him. I think he started that season at Duke as a third-string quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
First two guys go down, and here he comes. He emerges. I followed him from that point on, part of which because I really liked his story, and also because David Cutcliffe was still very entrenched there at Duke at the time. I grew up going to David Cutcliffe camps. So on draft night, I actually got to share that and bond with Dan a little bit, talking about how I knew a lot of the Cutcliffe people, understood the culture and the cloth that had developed him as a quarterback, met him on the red carpet and his parents. I always felt that New York was the wrong fit, but still in my mind, I just kind of had that doubt, like, how is it possible to see what this guy was doing at Duke and not be able to put it together consistently? So to see him get off to this fast start, I think I'm going to be tuning in, watching your Colts a little bit more this season.
It's funny you mentioned David Cutcliffe. Obviously, he spent an extended period of time at Tennessee, starting in the mid-'80s. He was there at Tennessee with my college quarterback coach, offensive coordinator, some of the time, and that was Coach Sanders. I knew that the way that they worked with quarterbacks was you always got to pay attention to the quarterback that Cutcliffe has, whatever school he's at, whether it was Tennessee or Ole Miss or at Duke. Daniel Jones is another quarterback out of the Cutcliffe tree. You know that he was raised right from a quarterback perspective. There's just a matter of time where he was going to thrive somewhere. And much like what we were talking about with Baker Mayfield, maybe Daniel Jones has found his home at the next stop, right? And I wish that for him.
Notice that it got late a little earlier in Gainesville again this past week. I actually saw some snowmen. Any thoughts on the struggles of the Florida Gators this year?
I don't know that they formalized the successor of Billy Napier, but I would say that Billy's time in Gainesville is limited. The expectations are much higher than the result. Florida, as you know, is completely different Florida than the one we competed against, 10 to 15 years ago. We know the talent's still there. It's just a matter of displaying that on the field. Florida, I'd say, is going to see some changes. Now, for our sake, since they released who Kentucky's going to play on a consistent basis, maybe, just maybe, they don't pick too well who the replacement for Billy Napier is.
Yeah, and hopefully they're not as successful with that. We'll keep our eyes on Florida and what lies up ahead for them. Let's switch over. Bill Belichick's North Carolina football team defeated this past week, embarrassed 34-9 by UCF on Saturday. Are we seeing the beginning of the end of the Bill Belichick era in North Carolina?
It's hard for me to imagine that Bill wants to keep doing this. Because, he's not driven by the money. He enjoys the game and he enjoys being around the game. But I think maybe the environment would have really been compelling to him. I wonder if he thinks that contributing to young people's lives and building it this way is the right thing for him to do based on his experience. And it's been a tough year. Now, I think the on-field football product will improve. But it's hard for me to imagine this is something that he views to be a good experience at this point in his career. But I think only time will tell.
I think when you're Bill Belichick and you have the body of work, he's got more than a resume at this point. He's got a real CV. Mm-hmm. And that thing's got pages and layers to it. Might be bound at this point. I think you do have to be careful being North Carolina. I do think that this is a delicate situation of you just try to maybe pull him in to see what he's thinking, talk personnel. But I think another critical element there too is you really got to look at the body language. You got to zoom in on the language, the response, the social media messaging of the roster. And I think that that's probably got to be one of the most important, if not the most important thing that if I'm an administrator that I'm gauging to see if these guys, if they've checked out completely from the Bill Belichick experience or if there are some limitations, if there are some things that are preventing this program from being successful.
I think there's some people that are going to maybe use this to validate what Tom Brady meant to Bill Belichick. in the grand scheme of things. They're going to use this time to see flaws in who Belichick is as a coach. But I think it takes time to take over a program and build it the way you need to build it in this current landscape of college football. So, well, let's see if he hangs in there. There's maybe some things that are a little concerning about the staff. I think Lombardi's got some of his people on the staff, Michael Lombardi. We'll see if they'll be able to put it together. I know that they have prioritized family members on the staff, maybe rather than some of the premier coaches in this sport. I'm not betting against Belichick. It's been a bad bet for 30 years. And I'm not going to bet against him. And yeah, remember, I grew up a Colts. Belichick still lives in my psyche as a fan and a follower of the Colts, because we couldn't beat them. The Colts couldn't beat them for forever when they were with the Patriots in the old AFC East. So I'm not betting against them, but they've clearly got some work to do.
Maybe it validates the people working in the front office that were helping facilitate the Spygate. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it was real. The Spygate, was that ever proven?
Yeah, it was proven. Sydney McLaughlin went into the UK Hall of Fame last year, just a few months after she won a whole slew of gold medals at the 2024 Summer Olympics. She was back in action again this past week in Tokyo, where she won more gold medals in the World Championships. Sydney McLaughlin may be the most dominant female athlete of our lifetime when she decides to retire from track.
Mm.
She's the most decorated University of Kentucky athlete in the school's history.
James had to argue that. And I think because she was here such a short time at Kentucky.
One and done.
Sometimes people forget the one and dones, whether it was track or basketball, and the impact that they had on the school in the time that they were there. I feel like I've been watching Sydney McLaughlin on the Olympics for 3 or 4 Olympics now. She's one of those people you always check and see when they run, when their events are, because you want to see her be successful. She's dominated most of the events that she's participated in. For an athlete, a young athlete, especially a female athlete, you want them to be able to look up to people that compete against themselves. Because when you're that dominant, you're not competing against the field. You're competing against yourself on a daily basis. An unbelievable example of what it's like to be an elite athlete.
I want to take this time to wish Jack Goose Givens a happy belated birthday. Being in this role as president of the K Club, I do spend a lot of time reaching out to letter winners to learn a little bit more about them and their journeys. Goose is a big part of that UK Sports Network coverage. Just a classy person, a legend on and off the court. I think he could probably still give Duke 41 in the national title game. Not sure if you've had a chance to read his book, but if you haven't, I'll give you a copy. They call me Goose, My Life in Kentucky Basketball and Beyond. Happy birthday, Goose, to a legend. We love you, brother.
Jack Goose Givens has just an unbelievable reputation in this state. He's somebody that highly decorated. Bryan Station guy. Bryan Station has a rich history of producing great athletes. And Jack has always been extremely gracious to me anytime that I've been around him. He's just a classy guy that represents the university in an unbelievable way. I'm glad he is a voice that many Kentucky fans get to hear on a regular basis.
Earlier, we talked a little bit of David Cutcliffe. We didn't mention the Mannings, one of the royal families that David Cutcliffe has formed such a strong bond with. One of the youngest members of that Manning lineage, Arch Manning, down in Texas. He's in the news for the wrong reasons this past week, taunting one of the Sam Houston State players after a rushing touchdown where he stood over him and looks like maybe he had some words for him. What are your initial thoughts there? I'm seeing a lot of articles coming out this week talking about how Arch Manning showed his true colors. I can't imagine the weight that he feels on his shoulders to go out and represent them and that Manning name proudly.
You know,
And I think this is a nothing burger, what he did there at Sam Houston State. Was it bad for optics? Yeah, okay.
Mhm.
But I'm pretty sure that we can go back through the archives And we can look at a lot of quarterbacks flexing, jawing. Look, I know Tebow, talked out there too, right?
Mm-hmm.
He did. He was a talker. He let you hear it. I was on a team with him for a time period there in Denver, and he was running his mouth in practice too. I think that the fans, is just overblown.
He's the next generation of Mannings. His uncles, his grandfather, his father to some extent. Supposedly mother was one of the athletes of the family as well. He's trying to uphold the Manning name at a place like Texas. That is a difficult position to be in. I don't envy that position whatsoever. He's trying to do all this while he's trying to learn the position. He's trying to play well. He's trying to prepare at a high level. So look, it wouldn't surprise me at all if he had some lapses in judgment when it came to how he reacted. And so I think we just saw that little snippet. We also don't know what that player said to him leading up to that point. We don't know if it was an expression that was based on maybe some frustration that he was trying to kind of use as an outlet in the moment. There's just a lot of things that could happen when you're playing competitive football like that. So I'm like you. I see a nothing burger. Now, if he'd thrown the ball at him or something, that might be something worth more talking about. But I think it was just a flex.
I use Monopoly and other board games as my litmus test for judging character. Seeing how potential girlfriends or potential spouses, how they behave and how they respond in the face of success and prosperity when maybe they're running the board on me and I'm having to pay rent and then I run out of money. Are you going to let me buy back in or are you going to bury me? That's how I judge character. It's not how you're celebrating in the end zone after a touchdown. If you don't want a guy to celebrate and jaw, then keep him out the end zone.
That's right. Yeah, I'll tell you, if you play me a Monopoly and I have a chance to bury you, I'm going to do just that. So that's the beauty of competition. That's the beauty of sports. When you're between that first whistle and that last whistle, it's a fight. It's a war. And that's what it's supposed to be. It's sports. But after the game, you love each other up, you shake hands and you move on.
I agree. In between those whistles, good luck. Liam Neeson voice.
Good luck. Yeah. Good luck.
Good luck. But, dude, there's been a lot of talk this week about the brotherly shove or the tush push, as some people refer. Jason Kelsey seems to think that it has kind of reached a feverish pitch.
Mm-hmm.
There's some people saying that they think the Eagles ran it 6 or 7 times in that game against Kansas City. Is it time to end the tush push, or do teams have to figure out how to stop it?
Can't end a play because it's successful. Now, if it's illegal, which I have seen some people jump all sides, and they've done a poor job of managing false starts on the tush push, then I think that's a completely different thing. And I can see a scenario where they officiate it more closely. There's people that don't like run pass options in football. There's people that don't like they took the wedge out because it was dangerous on kickoffs. But it's always been because it's either A, dangerous, or because it's illegal. And I think that's what you'll see. I don't know that NFL is going to want the Eagles to tush push 10 to 15 times a game. I can see a scenario where they discourage the tush push from happening the way that the Eagles run it by officiating it more closely. And they're already setting up for it.
It's one thing to do it 2 or 3 times, but when it becomes your preferred 3rd and 1 play, especially in the second half, I do think that there's a gamesmanship that you have to protect if you're the NFL to make sure that this product doesn't become predictable. And I think that there's an element there where the NFL will want to make sure that fans aren't able to just guess. They're getting ready to do the tush push. So I agree. I think it will be adjusted with the way that the refs officiated. They will find reasons to throw flags. And that's one of the things as a former NFL player that you learn is that different teams, they have their own data. And they know going into games what referee crews specialize in. And there's some plays, there's some formations, there are some things that teams do not do based on who's reffing the game.
Yep.
And that's something that we don't hear talked about a lot. I think that's a really cool piece of information. If somebody's interested, we can definitely dive in and talk about that a little bit more.
Look, it's part of game day preparation to know what kind of officiating crew you and what their tendencies are, much like it is to know what the defense or offensive tendencies are on the opposing team. I think the risk and the reward will change on the tush push when Philadelphia goes from 4th and 1 to 4th and 6, because the odds and the numbers change if there's a false start. Same thing if they go from 3rd and 2 to 3rd and 7. I think if they do that enough, it'll really discourage them from doing it, the tush push the way that they've done it. No one has really done it like the Eagles have. And I think it's kind of fascinating to think about why they haven't been able to replicate it across the league.
And that's incredible to me as well, because you can watch the film and you can see exactly how they do it from 3 or 4 different angles. It lets you know that this is clearly something that they're practicing. Mm-hmm. And this isn't just lining up and guys shooting off the ball. I think that they have this down pretty much to a science of how they're linking up, how they're executing this play. Mm-hmm. And they have the right personnel up front that is capable and willing to do exactly what they need to do to get it done. And it kind of reminds me of, there was a stretch in time where Kentucky was the number 1 team in college football over a period of time at blocking field goals and extra points. Mm-hmm. And the mastermind behind that was the guy that recruited me, the late Steve Ortmeyer, who I love and miss dearly. But he had mastered exactly how to block extra points and field goals. It wasn't an accident that we led college football in that category. And it was landmark based. It was very scientific, and everybody had a specific job there on that field goal unit. And we knew that if guys got the job done, you could see guys celebrating before the kick was even blocked, because they knew that they got to their landmark, got the push needed to get the jumper up into the line in order to execute the play. That's just attention to detail. It's mastery. It's a master class of when effort and coaching combines and people are able to execute on it.
Yeah, I mean, elite coaches find ways to create advantages, to enhance their specializations, and to make a difference. You talked about Coach Ort was a guy that's been around the game a long time, and had seen a lot. And a lot of those more tenured coaches paid really close detail to the nuances of every element in the game. That's what made him a great special teams coach, a part of the game that often gets overlooked by fans and by many folks. When you can create advantages like that, whether it be the tush push or it be blocking kicks, to use your example, those are game changers until somebody figures out how to do it better or how to stop it.
And the question that I pose to you is, if you know that there's people in your community that possess these trade secrets, and let's say that you're a college coach or a high school coach, what do you do to try to extract this information to potentially replicate it? Do you think that there's an opportunity for current coaches, whether it's at the college level or the high school level, go back and look at statistics and look at data and try to recreate some of the successes that have occurred within your own state? Is there an opportunity to exchange information from the success of a Coach Haywood in Eastern Kentucky?
Sure.
Or a Coach Ortmeyer at the University of Kentucky to the current staff at LCA or at UK for Mark Stoops and his staff?
Yeah, football is a copycat game. If people have success on certain plays, they're always looking for ways to duplicate that success and to drive the game forward. And we've seen that over years and years of watching the game and studying the game. There's certainly opportunities to gain knowledge from folks that are doing it at a high level.
Morgan, I think sentiments in the community, running into fans at the grocery stores and other random places over the course of the bye week, is this the start of the Black Parade, or is there getting ready to be a respawn of the football program? There's a lot of commotion coming out of Columbia. And every year, you've talked about it, we've talked about it last year on the podcast. This is the game that each one of these teams has to win to have the type of season that they want to have.
Right.
Hunger game of Hunger Games. What is the recipe this weekend against the Gamecocks on the road to be able to go in and come out with a victory?
Defensively, because when you have a young quarterback that's starting in the first true road game, it always has to start with the defense. And the defense has got to be prepared to hold South Carolina. We're talking 21 points or less. That's got to be a big part of the formula. You got to expect there to be some growing pains offensively with Cutter in his first true road game starting. I know he played at Texas last year, but this is the first true one that he started. And I think they got to be able to rely on that defense. We know it starts with Sellers. Last year, surprised Kentucky at Kroger Field early in the year by just how talented they were, how strong they were, how formidable they were on both sides of the ball and with their attack offensively. And although we've been challenged stopping some of the movement quarterbacks in the past, I think that's going to be a key point of emphasis, is keeping Sellers under control.
No, I agree with that, Morgan. And Sellers caught me by surprise last year as well. I thought Brad White, from a schematic perspective, I thought our players played really well. The score wasn't indicative of that, but when you go back and you watch the film, you really saw Sellers. He grew up that day. Mm-hmm. He did not look like a freshman. He looked like an experienced quarterback that had started multiple games, but we knew that wasn't the case. Right. I saw a guy standing in the pocket, delivering passes, difficult contested catches made by these South Carolina wide receivers last year, and they just were consistent with it throughout the game. Now, on the offensive side of the ball, if we go back and we listen to the Countdown to Kickoff radio show, I made it very clear on that show that I didn't think that we had the personnel to block Kennard and Dylan Stewart off the edges. And, people, they kind of look at me, Jarman, this guy's defensive end centric. And, of course, that's what he thinks. But with that being said, I knew that those guys were game wreckers, and that they did. Mm-hmm. They were in our backfield. They were very disruptive. And you look at a guy like Dylan Stewart, who I think highly of, as do a lot of people. He's something different. But we've talked about upgrading and how this offensive line is upgraded. The moniker Beast of No Nation. And I'm very high on this group.
Yeah.
I like a lot of the things that I've seen from this group on film. People, if you look at the box score, you see we gave up a few sacks against Ole Miss, but those weren't the kind of sacks that distress you. It wasn't because someone came off the edge and dipped the shoulder and we had a left tackle that wasn't capable like how we did last year. We had a guy last year that literally was on an island and he panicked and he bailed from his footwork. And I just think that this group, from a pass pro perspective, I think we got a really good group.
Yeah.
How good? I don't know. But this is the ultimate test for Shias Pete, our left tackle, who I'm on record saying early week one that I think he's got elite footwork. Now, recovery, there's some areas that are about average, but I expect him to hold up. I really do. I expect Woolslager on the other side. I expect him to hold up, and I also expect our backs this week to do a really good job of trying to neutralize those guys because, as you know, our quarterback, Cutter Boley, we have to keep him off the ground. We have to keep him upright, keep him from getting hit.
Yeah, it's a crucial part of the game. Cutter isn't necessarily a guy that Bush is going to run very much and involve him in the game that way. I think he's going to certainly lean heavily on those backs. And if you look at the game with South Carolina last year, and I'm sure that's one of the first things that Bush and company are going to do is pull up the game and from last year and see kind of how we matched up. One of the very few highlights of that particular game was what we were able to do in the run game. We were able to run for 139 yards last year. Granted, it was on 46 attempts, so not extremely efficient, but it was still a big part of what we did in the run game. Now, on the other end, the pass game was anemic. It was awful. It was one of the worst passing games that we had last year, with Vandergriff only throwing for 30 yards. I think it's going to be critical that we get Cutter started with some easy completions, get him in the rhythm and the flow of the game early so that South Carolina can't just peel their ears back and attack us in pass rush, and we can keep it very balanced. Last year just wasn't a very balanced game. It was not a very efficient game on third or fourth down. And really, there was only 180 yards at home with total offense, which isn't going to get it done against the South Carolina team that will score some points.
And specifically, when we talk about trying to slow or thwart that pass rushing attack from South Carolina with schematics and with getting Cutter into the rhythm, we're talking about tempo. That's one of the ways. Getting the ball outside the numbers, check downs. The screen game is as good as it's been in several years.
Mm-hmm.
What I seen on film against Eastern Michigan, guys like Wolschlager, Big Hoyer, number 87 out of Chicago, getting downfield. Josh Caddis getting downfield in the screen game. Jalen Farmer working up to the second and third level in the screen game. That offensive line group is legitimate.
Mm-hmm.
I really believe in this group of guys. These guys work extremely well. Farmer, he's really popping in that run game to me. Good low pad level, working up to the second level with those combo blocks where he's getting the bang down on the inside and then working up and getting up to the mic consistently. Jagger Burton, you really saw his athleticism. Despite bulking up and getting thicker this offseason, we saw him downfield as well in the screen game. There's a lot to like there.
Yep.
And last week, Morgan, I may have been a little too harsh with my what-if scenarios in terms of what if we're too tight end heavy? What does that mean? Are there implications there from the wide receiver perspective? But when I went back over the course of the bye week and I watched the growth of our tight ends from the last 3 weeks, and one of the things, or there's actually a couple things that stand out to me. That tight end room, that group is playing at a level across the board as high as I think I've seen the tight ends play, like a group of them play in several years.
Mm-hmm.
From a blocking perspective and a receiving and a pass catching perspective. Josh Caddis, his play in the run game and his hands in the passing game, he's got to be playing at a pace that's top 5 in all of college football.
Yeah.
He's catching every ball that's thrown to him, several explosives in the Eastern Michigan game. He's continuing to grow as a blocker in the run game. And Willie Rodriguez as well with his route running, his hands. We mentioned Hoyer, who's showing that he's dominant in the run game as well. These 3 tight ends that we're seeing consistently, that room, these guys, they are competing with each other and against the other team. That is a scrappy group that I'm very impressed by at this stage of the season.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great group. They're doing a great job. If you look at this team and you look at places where there's an advantage, it's the tight end room. Caddis, in particular, has really changed the perception of who he is as a player. I think a lot of people viewed him as an undersized, inline blocker, kind of coming into the receiver. I think maybe the on-field product supported that thought of him and who he is. But I can also tell you that sometimes a shift, just like we talked about with Dale Jones earlier in this conversation, maybe the shift with tight end coaches, the shift with the personnel has put Caddis in a position where he could flourish. It's created an opportunity for him to be more involved in the pass game. I am a firm believer, and we talked about this last week, based on Kentucky's current personnel and their current weapons, that the tight ends have to play an integral role in this offense. I think a lot is going to be put on them in order for this offense to be successful. Cutter's very comfortable with them, the quarterback's best friend, the quarterback's roommates in this particular case. And I think what we do with the tight ends has a chance to be a differentiator, something that's going to give defensive coordinators, guys like Coach White, the defensive coordinator of South Carolina, give him some fits, because you're not going to be able to just key in on personnel the same way that you do when you're running receivers on and off the field. When we have 2 tight ends and more on the field, they've got to be able to respect what we can do in the run game.
Last week in front of our podcast congregation, I openly accepted Cutter as my QB1 and our football savior. I drank all the Kool-Aid and probably went back and mixed up another pitcher. I guess the question, Morgan, that I have for you is where do I go from here? Should I travel around and continue to spread the message, or do I just sit back quietly and wait to see if we're right?
I think the jury is still out on whether you should be a disciple of Cutter Boley. He's got still a few games where he can prove his viability, but we know the tools are there. And I think this is a great opportunity for him coming off 2 weeks of preparation for his first true road game as a starter. There's no better opportunity for him to be successful and to do it at South Carolina. It's a night kick. So that place is going
7:45.
That place is going to be rowdy. It's going to be rocking, and it's going to be deafening at times from a noise perspective because they understand how crucial this game is as well. That place gets loud. You and I both have experienced that, and that's going to be a factor as part of this game.
There's another element to it too, and hopefully there's some listeners that have been to South Carolina since they got their light show. And I suspect that some of our biggest boosters, when they experienced the light show in Columbia a couple years ago, it had a lot to do with us getting ours last season, because part of their scheme out there, in my opinion, is to keep those lights off for as long as possible. It does require the coaches on the sidelines to have flashlights to provide their own lights, because the colors, like the colors that were flashing red and white lights, I've never seen anything like it. I got some footage on my phone, and I remember talking to some of our athletic directors, and I made it clear to them, I said, if there's going to be a capital raise campaign and I can earmark my dollars, I will earmark my dollars for the light show. So be sure you call me when you're raising that capital. And apparently somebody beat me to it, because one benefactor, after seeing the light show at South Carolina, cut that check to make sure that our fan base could experience that as well. And if we wanted to try to exhibit some poor gamesmanship like how I experienced in Columbia, South Carolina, we very well could.
All of the different ways you can invest in your fan base. If lights are going to be one of those things that helps, I'm all for us doing it. Kentucky's got one of the best fan bases when it comes to supporting their team. It's part of the reason why Kentucky is now viewed as one of the best football jobs, not to rehash. But I'm a firm believer that if the lights are going to enhance the experience for the fans, then that's what they should do. And it sounds like South Carolina was a leader in that area. And it's part of playing on the road. You've got to account for all of those different things. And the best coaches will prepare them for everything. They'll be prepared for the weather, the wind direction, the fans. They'll know which side of the stadium is louder. They'll know if any of the guys in stripes have ties to Beamer. The best coaches are going to know all of those things, and they're not going to leave a stone unturned.
Vandy, very successful a couple weeks ago in their travels to Columbia, as well as in their matchup against the College of Charleston. It's safe to say that Vandy has a full blockade there at the Port of Charleston and the Port of Georgetown. Good thing we're going in by air when we take the field there. What is the one stat that you look to say that it'll give you a picture of potentially what the weekend looked like for us?
In the Vandy versus South Carolina game, the yards were actually pretty even. I always look at yards. I always look at time of possession. Vandy dominated the time of possession. But the stat that jumps off the page to me in that game were the turnovers. South Carolina had 2 fumbles and 2 interceptions, 4 turnovers in that game against Vandy. You've got to think they're talking about protecting the ball in that South Carolina camp this week. That's going to be a point of emphasis. They had 85 yards worth of penalties. So I'd say those are going to be the 2 areas that they're going to be most focused on this week. And I think if you're Stoops and his staff, I think you want to try to replicate some of the success that Vanderbilt had. You know, much like going back and looking at the game from last year and seeing what opportunities you have to maybe duplicate some success, but also not fall into the same valleys that you fell into last year. You're also going to look at their most recent game and recent games and identify what was the formula to beat them? Turnovers was clearly part of that formula last week. And Brad White and company are going to try to create some turnovers, specifically interceptions.
Diego Pavia was very effective in that game in terms of percentage, 18 of 25 for about 175 yards, more than 2 touchdowns and an interception. Vanderbilt, from a rushing perspective, looks like they had about 146 yards combined on the ground. They had a few explosives in there that came by running back, but as well as a wide receiver in that game. But I think Vandy, they do such a good job, and we've talked about this before, with their run scheme.
Yeah.
And if you're an undisciplined team, Vandy was able to take advantage of that on a few occasions there, being able to gap South Carolina. We know that there's some guys out there that lack discipline at times. We know that they got that in them. We also know that they got some quit in them.
Yeah.
And I think that's really good to know, too, that they got a little bit of quit in them, because we did see those guys just kind of stop really pushing. I think our run game's going to be critical. You alluded to how last year, how we were able to be effective in the run game. Us having a better offensive line this year, I do not think South Carolina's defensive line is as good as it was last year. Still good nonetheless, but those opportunities are still there for us in the run game. McGowan 2 weeks ago against Eastern Michigan, 3 games into the season, and it looked like somebody was controlling him with a joystick. His legs, his pop, his explosion, his spin moves, everything looks so crisp for a guy that's been carrying the football for 3 weeks, and one of those being the week before against Ole Miss.
Sure.
And I'm very encouraged by our stable of backs, and we're going to need all those guys. But I bring those guys up to say that we haven't seen our backs get as involved in the passing game. We've seen them get involved a little bit. Vanderbilt found opportunities to get their backs involved in the run game, and they created some big plays there. When you look at the success of our offense against Eastern Michigan, it seemed like he was setting up some mouse traps.
Yeah.
Potentially.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that he's going to have some wrinkles in place where there's going to be some opportunities to make some explosives in this offense.
Some of the best coaches are going to put those traps out there. They're going to put some formations, put some motions, put some plays on tape that are going to have the opposing team preparing for, spending time on in practice. And I'm certain that was the case with Bush. And I mean, they knew that the South Carolina game was something that was on the horizon. As you look into the Missouri game, South Carolina was very effective in the pass game, 300 yards in the pass game, 18 to 28, not super efficient, but some big chunk plays, 10 yards a pass. They were horrific in the run game, 22 attempts for almost less than a yard per attempt. Now, some of that, in colleges, we know, yardage, so that gets a little skewed. But the running game was a big struggle for South Carolina against Missouri. So that's a great opportunity for Kentucky. It was another week where South Carolina's opponent dominated the time of possession, and it tells me that you can run the ball against them and you can stop the run against them, and that's going to put you in a position to win and be successful.
Brad White's defense, their last outing against Eastern Michigan. I told you I needed an extra week to work on my mental health and get some extra workouts in and just take my time trying to unpackage some of the things that have been put on film. And we got to get some guys back and healthy, Morgan, in the absolute worst way, particularly out there in the secondary. Giving up 330 yards in the air, that was tough.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine how Brad felt in that situation, seeing lack of depth. Anytime you have some guys go down, you'd like to think that your young players, that they're going to perform and that they're going to compete better. And seeing that lack of depth out there in the secondary, now we all know why Mark had his concerns. He alluded to it. I thought he was very forthcoming and honest about his assessment, knowing that they were super thin and that if there were any injuries in the secondary, things could get leaky.
Mm-hmm.
Or just start taking on water.
Yeah.
And that's what we saw. And now I'm concerned with our linebacking core. We're starting to get into the dog days of the SEC football season. There's enough things that have been put on tape to have concern in terms of gap integrity and filling. off the edges, off those C gaps. Brad White, he's got his work cut out for him trying to put forward a scheme that sees the run game improve quickly because it has to. And I'm just not quite sure how he's going to do that. That's why I'm not the defensive coordinator. I think we both probably have some thoughts that there may be some things there on the linebacking level that we just can't overcome. And size and strength being some of those major ones. But there was also some concerns there as well after you play an Ole Miss team, and we talked about how critical it is to get depth against. And I saw countless times where we didn't get good depth, and Eastern Michigan was able to make us pay.
Yeah.
I'm just not sure that this group is going to be able to put it together quick enough. These coordinators, they love to fixate on things. It's almost like a psychosis.
Sure.
When you show them something that you can't master, that you're not effectively able to eliminate, they're going to fixate on it.
Yeah.
And not only are they going to fixate on it, but they're going to build wrinkles off of it. And they're going to get you guessing. I'm very concerned about a healthy Sellers and the potential for this offense to get back on track. And not necessarily by air, but there's some things there in the run game that they are going to try to exploit.
Jeremy, there's clearly going to be an emphasis for them put on being more effective in the run game. But Kentucky's coming off a game 2 weeks ago where they'd given up 330 yards to Kim, the quarterback from Eastern Michigan, and gave up 23 points to an 0-2 Eastern Michigan team that later became 0-3, but it was still 23 points at home, 13 of which came in the second quarter. So that is concerning. That's like you want to see that gets addressed in this bye week. Being able to get them off the field and not give up the big plays in the pass game. And they shouldn't really give up big plays in the pass game because we always play soft zone defense and zone coverage. It seems like most of the time we're in split safety looks, corners are playing off, we're not rushing much more than 3 or 4 in most scenarios. We should be able to play good coverage and be able to stop an Eastern Michigan team in the pass game. I'm concerned that South Carolina is going to look at that tape against Eastern Michigan and be like, hey, we've got some real opportunities in the pass game. If Eastern Michigan can go for 330, we need to really exploit Kentucky's weaknesses in the pass defense.
Now I understand why Brad White was extremely frustrated at halftime as well as at the end of that game, because there were many widespread issues. Effort not being one of them. Let me be clear about that. The guys up front and even the guys on the back end, I saw guys flying around. Up front, guys are getting good push. They're getting good knockback, getting after the passer very well. I really like what I'm seeing there up front. Them guys are strong. They're big and they're physical, and we're going to need them to continue that. This past week, in my opinion, should have been a back to the basics type week. Where you're emphasizing on defenders with clean footwork, getting out of back pedals, cleanly coming up, hitting the dummy, hitting the bag, wrapping and rolling. I'm seeing it players take immature angles. The experience isn't matching the product on the field. Come up, get your hat on the other side of the guy, wrap him up and bring him to the ground.
Right.
And to see us struggle with some of these basic concepts of good, clean footwork, come up, drive, wrap up, and tackle, it goes against everything that this Brad White defense has been built on, which, to your point, you say soft zone coverage, but guess what? There's been a lot of football games that Brad White has won with soft zone coverage where our defenders put their feet in the ground, come up, and they turn someone sideways, make them lean when they were standing upright. And the other thing that we talked about, the best defenses are very advantageous and very aggressive with getting the football out after explosive plays. We're not doing that either.
If you're going to play as soft as we play historically on defense, you want to be able to get a turnover or two. I think that's crucial. Maybe a quarterback gets impatient and throws a ball into zone coverage. I think it puts you in a scenario where the defensive players have their eyes on the offense and they're watching what's happening in front of them in their read keys, and they're watching the quarterback and what's happening in the backfield. Where In man coverage, those guys are going to have their eyes on their man and on the person that they're covering. You all shouldn't be in a scenario where you give up 10 yards a pass when you're playing as much zone as we play. If the completions happen, they really should be more than 5 or 6 yards of completion rather than 10 yards completion like they were against Eastern Michigan. So that means that there were some gaps. There were probably some lapses in coverage that needs to be fixed and needs to be addressed. Also, to the point that you mentioned, if you're going to be a zone defense, you can't be average tacklers. You got to be elite tacklers, because if you don't tackle that guy, then it puts you in a scenario where who's going to make that play when your eyes are on the ball carrier to begin with, rather than your eyes, your man, and your responsibility. So you know that as well as anybody. Getting home is important for those defensive linemen if you're playing a lot of zone behind, and you want to put the quarterback in scenarios where they have to check it down and take shorter and smaller completions.
It wasn't until I went back on the bye week where I could really appreciate one of the 2 interceptions that Ty Bryant had there in that Ole Miss game. I know that Ty's a very intelligent football player, and I know that inside his head on the interceptions where he drifted back, that there was definitely an internal dialogue going on in his head, basically telling him, not now, not now, not now. And the reference that I'm making is that when you run a lot of zone, there's a lot of influence. There's a lot of levels type plays that are designed to influence you up to open up the throwing window behind you. And for him to make the quarterback believe that he was being sucked into the underneath route, and at the last second, he starts bailing right before the quarterback releases the ball. He had patience, and I'm not sure if he was a thespian in college, but part of it is you got to sell it. And he really did a good job of selling it and drifting back and being able to get one of his 2 picks. We need to continue to see them making plays like that to have the potential to turn the game into UK's favor on the road, because we know that we have to generate turnovers. We generated 2 first-quarter turnovers against Ole Miss, got points off of them, and it still wasn't enough. And I don't think that this situation going to South Carolina is going to be any different. We talked extensively last week about Jay Boulware. I would like to see his unit find a way to spring one, whether it's a punt return, kickoff return. There were times where we went out into the portal and we got one of the best punt returners in college football. And when he came to Lexington, he was fair catching them. I don't know if this was part of the scheme, but I do think that we have to find some ways this week to get some positive yardage to give the offense some momentum.
Yep. Look, being in the similar position when you're taking some of your first starts, or his first start is specifically on the road. Look, part of the formula is playing good defense, winning the field position battle, winning the special teams battle, ideally winning the turnover battle, being efficient in the red zone. Taking points in this game is going to be humongous, even if you got to take some field goals at times.
Don't get me started on that, bro.
Oh, tell me about it. Playing this game from ahead, I think, is going to be important too, because you want to be able to stay balanced offensively. You don't want to be in a scenario where he's a sitting duck and he's dropping back on a more than 50% basis in your first road start. So I think those things are critical. Winning special team is going to be paramount, especially when you're on the road. It's a sign of a good coach either way, but also playing good defense and getting yourself in a scenario where you can take advantage of field position. Those are going to be keys to success this week, and it's going to be a huge part of Kentucky's head. We'll pull it out on the road.
Morgan, what are some NFL games that you'll have your eyes on this week? And if not any games specifically, who are 1 or 2 teams that you think we should be keeping our eyes on, as well as the Kentucky fan base? I'm going to go ahead and throw one out there. How about them Jags? I tell you, when I look at Trevor Lawrence, to see him smile again on the sideline and in that locker room, I'm looking at a guy who at times last year I felt like his football soul had been taken from him.
Yeah.
Is there a little humor there? Yeah, a little bit. Trevor Lawrence is a strong kid, one of the highest rated quarterback prospects in the history of modern recruiting services, if not the highest. So to see him hit bottom like he did last year and to see him start to have some success this year, this team bounce back with our guy, Liam Cohen, I think that that's super special, that momentum that they have going. I wish I could say I knew Liam always had that in him. I knew he was a good OC. His ascent has been incredible to watch. I'm hopeful that they're able to keep the momentum there.
Good start for Liam to be 2-1 and to have some success early. And then they got a key win in the division, the AFC South, too, against the Texans, who are on the other side 0-3, which is kind of weird because I think a lot of people thought the Texans would be a playoff team. And the Texans have really struggled to get the year started. A couple buddies of mine, we want so badly for CJ Stroud to be one of the next elite quarterbacks, and it just hasn't quite happened yet. And I think to some degree,
it's hard, man.
Yeah, it's difficult. But we're rooting for CJ Stroud. We are rooting for him. It's been a rough go. He just hasn't quite turned the corner. He had a little bit of a sophomore slump last year. And so I think the Texans really need to get it going. I think as of right now, the Ravens are the best team in the league. I know they lost a game, but based on what I've seen from them, they are coming back this year with a vengeance. And they really should have beat the Bills week 1, and it was kind of some fluky things that happened. I'll tell you a team that's kind of interesting to me, and we'll see if they're going to be able to keep it up, are the Chargers. Harbaugh, another Harbaugh brother, they're out there on the West Coast. It's going to be tough to make it in the AFC with the likes of Mahomes and Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. But the Chargers started out really hot, and they've gotten a win over the Chiefs and a win over the Broncos, a few division wins, and I think they're rolling, right? So, that's one I'm going to be keeping an eye on because they get some reprieve in their schedule coming up.
I think the Bills are another one that we're going to continue to keep eyes on as well. I think Josh Allen is off to a hot start, obviously. A lot of success that they're having there, but the ties between the UK football roster and the Buffalo Bills, the history between the Buffalo Bill and his ties to Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
Love Kentucky so much and respected some of the Native Americans, Morgan, that lived here in Kentucky, that he named his son Kentucky. I think there's a lot of Kentucky ties between these Bills and our Kentucky Wildcats and the great people of the Commonwealth of Kentucky that I'm going to be cheering for them a lot this year as well. Hopeful that Josh Allen potentially finds a way to get over this hump and bring a Super Bowl to those people that are very deserving in upstate New York.
Jeremy, I think, the Bills, the fan base, really gone through it. I don't know if anybody's more deserving than a Bills fan for the amount of times in the 90s they went to the Super Bowl and just couldn't pull it off. And now they've been blessed with Josh Allen and have him at the helm. So I wouldn't have a problem seeing them get over the hump. Now, if they play the Colts, you know who I'm going to be going for.
My wife listened to the pod last week, and her reaction was, she's like, Morgan's hard on you. And I was like, what part of the podcast are you referring to? She specifically referred to our economics discussion. I kind of stalled you out a little bit. She was like, Morgan made some comments about how he's told you time and time again about the economic situation with the quarterback room. And it kind of put me back in an old scene thinking about my econ professor, 201, 202, micro and macroeconomics, Darren Gulla. I understand it now. And I appreciate you being patient with me and probably our listeners as well, explaining some of the nuances between what it takes to rise into the position to become QB. It's not all based on your talent. There are other factors at that position. There's only one football. And I go back now and I look at some of the things said around Cutter and some of the things that weren't said. Cutter in response to Cutter being referred to as the future.
Sure.
And I think on last week's show, I made it very clear that I'm ready for Cutter to be referred to as the present, because that was something that had been missed over the past few weeks and even at opportunities last season. I'm excited about the present situation for Cutter Boley. I think that this is a moment that he has prepared for, and I'm not referring to one singular game. I'm referring to the body of work that we have both heard over the past 2 seasons.
Yeah.
passes, performances, scrimmages that I have witnessed with my own eyes.
Mm.
And I'm so excited for Cutter to be ascending into this position as QB1. I think that he deserves it. I think that he has earned it. I think that his teammates are genuinely excited for him, as evidenced by the route running. When you go back and you look at film against Eastern Michigan, the passes that he was dropping in, beautiful balls, into cover 2 coverage in between corners and safeties coming over the top. The timing, the touch, I really feel like there was a little bit of extra spring in the step of our wide receivers last week. And if they come ready into Columbia with that same type of energy and effort, surrounded by this beast of no nation, big blue wall that the staff has assembled, I think it's a recipe. This week going into Columbia, our offense has to be the aggressor. I think Mark Stoops has to turn Bush Hamden free to go and score as many points as possible. Let Cutter air the football out, find opportunities to get him into a rhythm, and take shots. I'm excited for Cutter as QB1. What are your thoughts?
First of all, apologize to your wife. We have these conversations. I have to remind myself at times, it's follow the money. And it's not just Dustin Hoffman movies and All the President's Men when he referred to following the money, and as they were talking about like the Watergate scandal. You and I are both kind of historians. So whether it's Richard Nixon or Cutter Boley, you follow the money. I don't think people will come out and say it, but I always felt like that was a part of some of the decision making early on. But that's behind us. And I think the most talented player in this particular case, like you mentioned, the present, gets an opportunity to start this week in South Carolina. There's a possibility that there's going to be some I told you so's, or there may not live up to some people's expectations of him, specifically fans. But I guess what I would encourage people to do is give him some time, allow him to get some reps under his belt. This is a great week to start building some of that experience. And if there's one thing he proved against Eastern Michigan, is that he will try to get the ball down the field. He will give our receivers and our tight ends opportunities to make plays down the field. It's going to be critical that we win the turnover battle and that we don't put the ball in harm's way. That's just a formula for success. The number one indicator winning or losing is turnovers. But Cutter will give our guys chances down the field. And I think you're going to need that to win some of these games.
That's all the time we have for this episode. A huge thank you for listening and going on this journey with Morgan and myself. This podcast is powered by the Kentucky K Club, where we support Wildcats of the past, present, and future. You can watch the full video of this. Follow us on X, Instagram, and TikTok at LetterWinner Pod. I'm former All-SEC defensive end.
And I'm former QB Morgan Newton.
Thanks for tuning in.